Welcome everyone back to Out of This World. I'm Jamie Hanshaw, and guess who's back with me? Rachel
It's
Wilson.
me.
Finally, it's been a long time since we've done a show, several months at least. And we're gonna do the usual, right? The classics. Me and Rachel talking about Britney Spears' new book, bestseller. I saw it when we were in Italy. Actually, I bought it at the airport. And then all the bookstores we passed in Italy is like Britney Spears and The Woman in Me. So we read it so you don't have to. How did you
You're
like
welcome.
it? Yeah.
You're welcome.
What did you think?
Well, it wasn't like a book that you and I would normally read, right? It wasn't like probably most of the books behind you or the books behind me. Um, it's a very entry level, very easy read. And aside from like one big thing, I don't think there was a ton of revelation. Like, I think we both thought there might be more. Like
Mm,
we were gonna have some new stuff revealed to us. So it was a little disappointing that way. And yeah, I felt like I was reading definitely a ghost written kind of biography of Britney told from her perspective, but like not I didn't feel like it was very intimate either. I feel like they took a lot of very easily accessible information that's already out there, threw it on a timeline and kind of told it the information from Britney's point of view.
mhm,
And there was some insight and things like that, but I mean, I feel like a lot of like normie Britney fans will probably like it because it sounds like they're talking like she's talking to them. So I think from that perspective, it's probably going to be really successful, and it gives the Britney lore like an official narrative. I feel
mhm.
like that was like probably the purpose of the book more than anything.
To me, it's weird because Britney's whole career is like an inception type thing. Like you wake up from one nightmare and you're still in another nightmare, and then you wake up from that and you're still in another nightmare. And I had a compound dream like that a couple of weeks ago, and it freaked me out. Like I didn't know. I woke up and I'm like, is this real? And so this book is supposed to be some kind of proclamation of freedom. Um, but I feel like she's still not free because look what she's doing on Instagram. I mean,
Yeah.
she's wielding knives naked. If she was actually free, she would be posting up, with her clothes on saying Christ is king. And,
Yeah.
that's true freedom. That's not what this book, the tale of this book is going to give you, right?
Right. Yeah. And I guess it was very anticlimactic in that like the way they explain her getting out of the conservatorship was very just like, and then one day I felt like maybe I was strong enough to do something about this, and so I went about the process of and I was just like, what? So it feels a little disjointed. It feels like sometimes it sounds like it might be really her telling you some things about how this really felt or what it was really like. And then other times it feels like a copy paste job that skips over things that you would think would be super important. Like the whole 13 years of the conservatorship, I thought there would be a lot more about what really happened because remember, she was kind of out of the public eye for a lot of those years from like 2007 until about 2 years ago when the conservatorship stuff really came to light.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knew she was doing Vegas. She had albums come out, but there wasn't a lot of like real insight into her life and what was going on in her personal life or things like that. And I thought there'd be a lot more of like what happened during that time. And they like again, they only tell you stuff that like you and I already found just from like searching online and stuff like that. So I still feel like I'm left with more questions about Britney than answers after reading the book
Um,
personally.
the title struck out to me, The Woman in Me, not the woman I am, or the woman
Right.
becoming, or the woman I have been, since I became an
Yeah.
adult. It's like there's different people in her, and one of them is a woman um that's grown.
Yeah.
But as we shall see, there's some we comb through it for you guys. We got some
Yeah.
um water from a stone from from this book to
Yes,
add some more
yes, I did.
insights
There
into.
were a few bits. Yeah, there I highlighted some stuff and I made some notes because there were some things that were said in the book that I was kind of like, ah, and maybe if they people who haven't watched our stuff or investigated this whole thing the way that you and I or some of the other people in the sphere have, might not notice it at all. But I think you and I probably noticed a bunch of those things. Especially like just a lot of talk of her feeling like a child
Yeah.
and thinking like a child, and that's a theme I do see with her over and over again is like she
Yeah.
retreats into this like childlike behavior, but I'm sure that we'll
Well,
get into all of that.
yeah, let's start off with her childhood. That's where she starts in the book. She starts saying that singing is spiritual for her.
Hmm.
Singing is magic. She said, singing took me into the presence of the divine on page 5. So
Yep.
singing is already her coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
For unpredictable caregivers. She says, as long as I was singing, I was half outside the world. So she's coming into this family, I would say highly dysfunctional,
Yeah.
right? More than
Yeah.
needing dysfunctional, I think. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Especially like one of the things that she did reveal in the book that I didn't know is like she says that she started drinking and smoking with her mom when she was 13. And I was
yeah.
like, okay, well, that's pretty
Yes.
like I had a pretty dysfunctional childhood too, but even my mom wasn't like drinking with me when I was 13, so that
Well,
was a little shocking.
the alcoholism is part of their lineage. We talked
Yeah.
about June Spears Sr., who was Britney's grandfather. She starts us talking about was abusive. She said he sent 2 wives to a horrible mental asylum and put them on lithium. One of
Yep.
them committed suicide on her dead baby's grave. So we did talk about that way back
Yeah.
when. But these are her first recollections when she's talking about where she came from.
Yeah. And she does say that she didn't know like by the time she was born the grandpa had settled down and she never saw him behave this way. And it made me wonder how much of this like she's really aware of and how much of it is kind of people writing the book on her behalf, inserting basic family lore as explanatory and things like that. So I wasn't sure. I just didn't feel sure that she really knew all this history.
Mhm.
I don't That's my big question is like I don't know how much of the things you and I wonder about or the things that we see it and we think of it a certain way. I still don't know if she realizes it. Because even from the book when she's talking about her experiences, it doesn't seem like she really understands like how messed up a lot of it is. On
Yeah.
a surface level, yes, but like on a deeper level, I don't know if she like there was no clue in this book that she is aware that a lot of the things that happen to her are very standard for what happens to these huge megastars who are controlled. There was like I didn't really hear any hint that she had any awareness that this happens all the time in the industry. And
Mhm.
you hear like who was I just listening to? Oh, it was Natalie Portman just came out in an article and said that when she was growing up in Hollywood, she was miraculously like not molested. and that
Wow.
and that happens to everybody else. Like she would never put her kids in the business because of how much it happened to everyone around her.
Mhm.
So I feel like a lot of people in Hollywood know this. Paris Hilton has talked about it a lot, but in this book at least, Brittany doesn't seem aware that this what happened to her is not totally bizarre. It's not like super unique to her. It's happened to a lot of other people like you and I have discussed. So I thought
Well,
that was
yeah, I think that's a point of a lot of the research we do is to like fill in the gaps for these people so they can, reintegrate and figure out what happened to them and then stop perpetuating this to the masses. That's
yeah.
that's our plan anyways. That's our diabolical plan.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah,
well,
so I didn't know if when she's talking about her family history if she really understands like again, the stuff though even the way it's told, even the like chronology of how it's told sounds exactly like what you and I relayed in in our first show about her and her early family history. So I was like, did the ghostwriters just do exactly what we did and like search things, search her family tree online and find stuff? It mentions the dad's siblings accusing June of SA and stuff as they were growing up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, does Brittany actually know that though? Like, I wonder if she's aware and has processed that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
in her book, but I still am not convinced like that she really grasps this or how much she even knows of what's in the book.
that's true. She said, yeah, the grandpa June essayed one of the daughters from age 11 to 16 and caused her to run away. And then
Hmm.
on her mother's side was a beautiful British lady from London who loved music. This is probably one of the reasons Brittany takes a British accent when she's switching. Also because she
Yeah,
used to go to London with Madonna, and London is a
yeah,
big center of
everything.
espionage and things,
Yes.
right?
All of the underground stuff. Yes, London is one of the big hubs for all of that.
So that's also one of the people in her, the British lady who she emulates her grandma
Yep.
by
And
talking.
the book even mentions how Lily was from London and that her mother was British and her father was from Malta, which I remember saying in that episode we did because, there's a lot of lore about Malta and esoteric
Hmm.
type things. So that's interesting. Like I said, it's like they almost checked off a box of everything that we had already said.
Uh-huh.
And I was just kind of thinking, as somebody who's written a book, I was thinking like, what made them choose to include these details in the scope of who this book is written for and why this book is written? It just seemed interesting, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it or what I think about it. I'm interested to see the comments when
Well,
everybody, chimes in on their comments what they think.
there is a thread of dissociation because one of her first memories um, of trauma black was her blacked out because she saw her brother in a car accident.
Yes.
So she says, I think God made me black out so I wouldn't remember the pain and panic or the sight of my brother's crushed body.
Yeah.
He's obviously good at this.
Yeah. And it's the first of like many instances of her saying, I don't remember what happened.
Hmm.
She'll be talking about stuff that happened and then say, I don't remember how this ended, or this and this happened, and then I don't remember anymore. Like there's multiple points through the book where she says that. So yeah, you're right. It seems like dissociation early on.
Hmm.
What do you think that is? Do you think that's like a symptom of just her being a little girl in this dysfunctional family and maybe being imaginative and creative, or do you think that there was already things going on that would necessitate her dissociating?
I think she became good at it because her caregivers were unpredictable. Like she said, her dad drank so much that he couldn't remember anything and they fought. She said her mom would be yelling because he was drunk. And
Yeah.
so she was more mad at her mom and couldn't sleep because her mom was pitching a fit. And she was like, at least he just passes out. Right.
Yeah.
So this is the environment that these little girls are growing up in. And I think that her being creative and able to disassociate made her a good candidate for these programs when they go on to join the Mickey Mouse Club.
Yeah. That
Right.
makes sense.
And with that essay history in their family tree, you know, she never said anything like that happened to her, but it's definitely in the epigenetic memory of her bloodline, right?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the other things she does reveal in the book is that she says she was sexually active since she was 14.
Yeah.
That's pretty young.
That is pretty young. So you don't know how bad it is until you like grow up and look back and you're like, oh wow, because when you're in it, you just think lots of kids are like that, or
Yeah.
lots of parents are divorced. Um you don't get perspective about how bad it was until you're older, I think.
Yeah.
So,
And she doesn't talk about like anything about those first experiences.
right.
She does talk about being at a friend's house having a sleepover and a much older guy she had a crush on suddenly appearing and kissing her.
Yeah. So this is even after she has been to New York to
Yeah.
audition for Mickey Mouse Club. At age 8, she's there with Christina Aguilera, Carrie Russell, and then they sent her to the Professional Performing Arts School in New York City. Um, and then she got a spot on Mickey Mouse Club the second time she auditioned with Ryan Gosling and Justin Timberlake. So
Yeah.
here's one of those suspicious funnels. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but it just seems like these, professional schools and different funnels that all of these people have to go through, and they come out on the other side super famous in the industry. Uh, these are the types of places where you would receive your first initiations into
Yeah.
deeper programs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. And it definitely seems like after those things happened is when she went back home and things weren't the same anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like she didn't feel like the same. And so she talks about, yeah, this mysterious, this is when Larry Rudolph and some of these people we had talked about before start to come into the picture because they're looking at her thinking she could really be a star. And when she talks about the guy, so guys, there's a part where she's talking about having a sleepover, and there's an older guy that she has a big crush on, um, that she never thought would be into her because he was a lot older. And she talks about how she was drinking and smoking by this age already. I don't
Yeah.
know if it says
Smoking by
exactly how old.
13, I put lost her V card to a boy in school in ninth grade, and he was a senior.
Yes. And so she talks about being says one night I was sleeping over at my bad friend's house.
Hmm.
Like, why are you sleeping over your bad friend's house? And with no warning, the guy I had a crush on snuck into the house in the middle of the night. And she says he started kissing me, and then we were fully making out on the couch. And she said, I thought, what is happening? It's like some sort of seance, like I had conjured him.
Yeah, yeah, that's a
And I
weird
thought, what
choice
a
of
weird
words.
thing for a 13-year-old girl to like. That wouldn't be my first thought at 13, that it was like a seance and I didn't know what a seance was, and I didn't know about conjuring at 13, but maybe I was not as precocious, but
Hmm.
it just made me wonder what she had been exposed to that she would think that.
Hmm. Well, because then she met Max Martin, and that's when they started writing the hits, "Baby One More Time,"
Yeah.
and everybody who's anybody works with Max Martin, right? He's the pop maker of the last 20 years at least, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Probably before like late 90s on, I'm sure.
and this is the time where she starts to tour with NSYNC and fall in love with Justin Timberlake. I mean,
Mm.
she's only 16, you guys. We think
Yeah.
when Britney's career starts, that's like adulthood, but she's only like not even a senior in high school yet when she did her first record,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah,
she,
she was still really young. What else do I have from this little part here? I think that was like, well, I mean, she already ends up, yeah, she had Larry Rudolph comes in the picture. She already has Felicia, who's like her lifelong assistant.
mhm.
Does it say, I don't remember if it says exactly how and where Felicia came into the picture.
I think she was
I
just a
feel,
friend of the family.
yeah, because she was around for most of Britney's career, and then during the conservatorship got kind of forced out of it, but
The mom had to work and take care of Jamie Lynn Spears, and so they got Felicia to be her like caregiver.
yeah. Yeah. Hearing her talk about Justin did make me sad.
I know it's really sad. All of these like pure first loves always get crushed because they did love each other. And this is when she started to notice that the media were treating them very differently. She said her questions were much more invasive and inappropriate, and we talked about that.
Yeah.
Um, she felt even back then they were setting her up to be embarrassed about being sexy by doing man on the street interviews about her performance and making her react to them. So they're already humiliation ritualing her.
Yeah.
Um, they're propping her up, telling her to be sexy, and then saying you're too sexy. And then she said something that Taylor Swift also said, is that she always wanted to be thought of as a good girl.
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of sad how these ambitions get twisted.
Yeah, a lot of the book repeats on the theme of her saying, I was doing what I thought everybody would like from me. I thought I was doing what would make everybody happy. And the more that she did that, the more she felt like people would turn it around on her and say, well, but this is why you deserve bad things, because you did this naughty thing or you did this sinful thing. And there's parts where she definitely, like, she says, oh, I think I have it marked in here, but she says she could like feel herself becoming a bad person, or she could feel herself turning into a bad, dark person in
Yeah.
certain points, which is just another one of the many times that she talks often about feeling like a child. Feeling like she talks about the movie Crossroads and how she became the character to a point that was scary and like scared her away from acting
Mm-hmm.
ever since then. So I think you're right when you say she had a knack for dissociation, and that just seems to be an ongoing theme. And I think like when people ask me about her now from time to time, like even my kids have been like, Mom, what the heck's going on with Britney? And I just feel like they scrambled her brain. And one thing that bothers me is like on Twitter and stuff, I'll see people saying, well, clearly it was a good thing for her to have this conservatorship because look, she's out of the conservatorship now and she's clearly insane. And I want to like scream at them and be like, she's insane because they scrambled her mind. They literally like made her insane
Mm-hmm.
over the course of many years with multiple different things that they did. Like they're acting like she was just a slutty girl who got crazy once she got older, and that is not what I think happened with her at all. I don't think
No.
that. I think that probably happens, but she I don't feel like that's what happened to her. She didn't seem crazy, she didn't seem insane, and now she is like I feel like she's permanently dissociated like a lot of the time.
Yeah, and they're trying to blame it on lithium too. And
Yeah.
so that's a big part of the problem is like it's not just being crazy and on drugs. There are like psychological procedures and medical procedures being done against her will and that she doesn't even remember. And this is our thesis, that it's not just mental illness and drugs. So um yeah, we were talking about her being so young in the media, and then she started to notice old men in her audience.
Yeah.
And they would call her a Lolita fantasy. And this is when she started taking Prozac. So the drugs is part of it.
Yeah. I was actually surprised that she started taking something so early on.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's when she started to really get big, but she wasn't even like quite Michael Jackson status yet or anything. I
Right.
was under the impression that that stuff came later, but she was started Prozac in an age where they would have had to prescribe it for her, as like adults would have had to prescribe it for her. And
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why. Like why they wanted to put her on that, because it didn't seem like she had had any severe mental issues yet at that point.
Yeah. And there's going to be a history of this because we did hear from a source once upon a time that uh, there was substances found in things given to her. Remember?
Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah, you mentioned her first movie, Crossroads, which is an esoteric thing. Um,
Mhm.
In Crossroads, she started method acting without even knowing what it was. She said, it's like a cloud or something came over me, and I just became this girl named Lucy. I
Yep.
was someone else for months while I filmed Crossroads. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I underlined all of that too. And she says, I know that seems stupid, but it's the truth. And then she says, I was someone else for months while I filmed this. Um, and then she says, I was a baby, just like the character, which seemed weird. And then she talks about how the film wrapped up And even after the film ended, she was still acting like this person. She said Justin even noticed it, and he would ask her, "Why are you talking like that? That's
Mhm.
not how you talk."
Yeah.
And she said finally, she went to a CVS with a friend, and she said, "When I came outside again, I was cured of the spell that the movie had cast." Again, like a very witchy, spell casty way
Mm.
of phrasing things, just
Mhm.
like the other thing I brought up. And again, I don't know if this is the ghostwriter doing this and they don't realize they're doing it. I don't really know what's going on with that, but I'm like, it just seems very weird that they keep referring to this in a way that almost feels like they're taunting us, Jamie.
I know. Using all these trigger words on
I
a
know.
um, so she said she couldn't do any more films
Mhm.
because she would become the person in the role.
Yeah.
She's too sensitive to that, and so if it was like a villain or something, then she would have to become that villain.
Yeah. She was like, thank goodness they didn't cast me as like a serial unaliver because I'm
Yeah,
afraid
right.
what would have happened. And she says in it, she says, I thought, oh my God, what have I been doing the past few months? Who was I? So that sounds like a really, this sounds like the first really big episode of dissociation where she actually says she realized that months had gone by, that
Mhm.
she wasn't Brittany, she was someone else.
Yeah.
That is very bizarre. Like, I've heard a lot of people say that acting can be really intense and that, like Heath Ledger in The Joker really had a hard time dissociating from that role. So I know these are things that happen, but this seems particularly intense because, like, she even admits in the book, Crossroads was not that serious of a movie. It was kind of a goofy movie, right?
Yeah,
It
it's just
wasn't
like
like
a
a,
girls go on a road trip and, like,
yeah.
sing songs and go karaokeing and
Yeah,
but
and it's like a coming of age tale and stuff. So for her to feel so severely dissociated from playing this character, and she says, I know it sounds crazy, but this is what happened. And so it makes me wonder because you've said, before that this is a reason, one of the reasons why they use actors for espionage and MK Ultra stuff and things like this is because they're really good at dissociating. And so it's like, how much of this was her just getting into the character, and how much of this might have been suggestion, drugs they had her on. Like, I wonder how much of it was purely coming from her and how much of it was coming from people and things around her that maybe she doesn't even realize that's why.
mhm.
Or maybe she does realize that and that's not gonna make it into the book. I don't really know.
The girl that was in that with her has been doing some strange interviews lately. I think her name's Taryn Manning. Do you know who that is?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was in Orange Is the New Black, and she's been talking a lot about I mean, she's been saying things that have me worried that I'm gonna see her in an article tomorrow about how she, is
Oh,
no
they're
longer
gonna
with us.
Anne Heche for things
Yeah.
she's saying, like, talking about gold drink or gold what was that? Gold juice? You
Yeah,
sent me that.
the golden juice. Yeah, she's like, "They wanted me to drink the golden juice, but I wouldn't drink it. I knew it was bad, and I wasn't gonna do that."
Yeah.
'Cause she's like, she basically said, "They tell you it gives you everything you want, but I knew there's, like, a cost, right? Like, I'm not just getting this for free." So she said she never did it, but that most people do drink whatever the golden juice is, which, of course, a lot of people were saying it was that word that starts with an A.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know, but yeah, she was in that movie with Britney, which
Yeah.
I totally forgot about until you just mentioned it. And at the end of this chapter talking about the movie, she says, "After a while, you don't know what's real anymore."
Mhm. Exactly, and then she goes on a tour called Dream Within a Dream,
Yeah.
2001,
Yeah.
and she said, "Every night on stage, I battled a mirror version of myself, which felt like it was probably a metaphor for something." You think? Yeah, I think it was a metaphor for monarchs,
Yeah.
right?
Well, when we did the episodes where you were talking about her music videos, you I feel like you're the only person that's ever reviewed her music videos and really seen all of the little things in there. I've never seen any I've seen a lot of, like, analyses of her videos, which that's your specialty, it's not mine. I'm not as good as I'll never be as good at that as you are. But I've seen other people analyze her videos and notice some really basic stuff, but you seemed to, like, be able to even chronologically be like, oh, you can actually see over the course of time how this is happening and what they're doing, and it made total sense to me. And when she was talking about this tour, yeah, that first page where she's talking about it, I was like, wow. And she mentions Wade Robson, who I do remember because I'm old, you guys. I remember him being super popular in like the late 90s and early 2000s as this ancillary choreography guy. He
Mhm.
was in a lot of the like MTV shows or VH1 shows. Like, remember when P. Diddy had a reality show about making bands, like making girl
Oh
bands?
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think he might have been in some of those. Like, he was around a lot. And she mentions that she cheated on Justin one time only, and it was with him.
I thought that was just a kiss too.
Yeah,
You said
she said it was a kiss, so I don't know if he's sleeping around. I don't know if that really counts as cheating on him too.
yeah. So
But
yeah, so this is like Brittany and Justin are the it couple.
mhm.
They're going to the award shows in all denim. Remember that era?
Oh yes, I do.
And he's cheating on her. Well, he's
Mhm.
always been cheating. He cheated on Cameron Diaz with Jessica Biel, then he cheated on Jessica Biel, and now he's getting his comeuppance because he can't dance anymore. Like the moves have left him. Have you seen?
Really? I
Yeah.
haven't kept up with him at all.
There's a TikTok of him dancing and he looks like a dad, like at a party, like awkward and like not dressed young at all. And it's just like everyone was,
Are he and Jessica Biel still together?
I don't know. He just does not have his head on right. He can't stay faithful. So he's cheating on her. She's kissing other boys too. It's just a
Yeah,
big
and she kind of the way it's described in the book is like this was normal and accepted for
yeah.
Hollywood or for like pop stars.
Well,
Like,
I think it kind of is. I think
yeah.
they're like, you're young and you have to experience all these different people. So, but then she gets pregnant with Justin's baby and she wanted to be a family with him, but he pressured her to get rid of it. And
Yeah, and like I said, this is the one thing that really was probably this was the big bomb to drop out of this book. When the book came out, before it was even in stores, this is the thing that came out because it was the one huge revelation that nobody had known. I don't know how they kept this secret, by the way, for all these years, but she says the only person who knew besides Justin and me was Felicia. So apparently her parents didn't even know.
Mhm.
And because this was a secret, it had to be done at home, and it sounds horrible. She describes the process in the book. It sounds absolutely horrible, totally traumatic. And I wonder because I just did a stream with Patrick about how sometimes these things are made into rituals.
I saw that in Cosmo magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes abortions are ritualized for magical purposes. And so I'm wondering to myself, like somebody else must have known, at least a doctor or somebody, because they had to get pills and whatnot for her to take. They told her it was gonna hurt. She describes it as this really traumatic and horrible experience, but I'm like, clearly someone knew. Someone had to know because who told her it hurt, who got the pills? Like, I feel like maybe somebody on Justin's team might have known. I don't know, but I feel like some prescribing doctor at least.
That's a big decision for two young kids under 20, I think at this point. How old are they?
Yeah. I think they were like 19, 18 or 19.
Be
She
making
was
on
pretty
their
young.
own with just Felicia,
Yeah.
deciding to take these pills. Yeah, it sounded terrible. It says, she took the pills at home and it was excruciating for her, and Justin came into the bathroom to help by playing guitar and singing at her.
Nice.
That doesn't sound,
Exactly what I want when I'm going through that.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and she kind of says she should have seen the breakup coming, but she didn't. I don't know, I just have this feeling because he didn't deny it when this news dropped. He
Hmm.
just said he didn't want to talk about it, but he didn't
Hmm.
deny it, so I believe it happened. I just wonder if it's if it was as uneventful at the time as the book says it is, or if that they don't want adults to be held responsible because she might have been 18. I think it says in the year 2000 that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And she's 2 years younger than me, so I think she would have been 18 at the oldest. I don't know. It just seems like a lot. I don't even think you could get those pills then legally at 18. I don't I'm not 100% sure. Again, I don't know like where they were located.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been in a place where you can, and of course these people can get anything because the doctors that they have will prescribe them whatever, but it almost felt to me like they tried to say nobody knew because they didn't want this book to come out, and for adults who should have been perhaps more responsible in this situation to be held accountable in a way. I don't know. It just seemed a little sus to me that like nobody would know about it, that her and Justin secretly acquired these abortion pills and did this whole thing and no one ever found out. Just seems a little bit hard for me to believe.
Well, in the context of what we're talking about too, like the selling your soul to the industry, these things are often considered a sacrifice
Yeah,
for
that's what I
that
was
purpose.
that's what I was kind of trying to hint at with the fact that they ritualize these things.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It just seems, again, I just feel like I have more questions than answers.
Oh yeah.
But
So,
she says after this happened that she was so devastated that she could barely speak for months.
mm-hmm. Well, then after he does this, um, the pills with her, he broke up with her soon after by text message, and he came out with his solo album Justified, where he put her as the cheater in the music videos. So she's feeling like the whole world's against her.
Yeah.
She can't tell the truth because it would make him look bad. She still loves him.
Hmm.
Um, and she went into a shock and she called it a trance,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
And
and I mean, just she says that he texted her while she was on the set for the video Overprotected, which that she says in the book, I didn't really know the meaning of that song even at the time like I do now, which I don't know about that, but it's a remix by Dark Child. You know,
mhm.
that's the guy's name, the producer or whatever. And it just, I don't know, all these little details just seem too coincidental for me. Like the names of things, the timeline of things. I remember the Crimea River video coming out and it being like this huge deal because
Yeah.
you could tell in the video that it was clearly like a Britney Spears doppelganger character in the video.
Yeah.
And it really made it, yeah, it really made it sound like she was the one who did him dirty. And I don't know, like, again, I'm not there. I don't know if her version of I only cheated one time and it was just a kiss is true. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I don't know what happened there with him just dumping her via text and stuff like that. And then he came to see her like later.
That's what reportedly Russell Brand did to Katy Perry one time. Told her he wanted a divorce on text message while she's about to go on stage. Do you ever
Did he like come back and try to chat it? I think they had a on again, off again stuff for a little while too. But
uh
they filmed that. Like Katy Perry had a whole tour special where they filmed that happening to her and it showed
yes.
her like sobbing in the dressing room when it happened. So you wonder how much of this is like we're going to intentionally traumatize this person. We're going to make it part of their show. We're going to
Hmm.
film behind the scenes documentaries. We're going to it's just so weird.
Hmm.
And a big part of me still doesn't want to believe that this stuff really goes on, but it
I
clearly
don't
does.
want to be right about this, but
Yeah.
we soldier on. So after this trance, she says her little sister Jamie Lynn turned into a total bitch.
Yeah.
And she's been popping up again looking not like herself.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yes, I have.
She looks about 20 years older than she should. Um, I don't know
I
much.
was I was showing some of the Instagram stuff to Andy and he was like, neither of them look like the same two people to me. He's like, it
I
doesn't look like
know,
the same person.
right?
Yeah, and I don't think he was trying to say, "Oh, they look bad for their age," or anything. I think he was trying to say that to him, they literally don't look like the same person.
Right.
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with Britney's teeth.
Well, she's she said she's felt like she's growing in reverse like Benjamin Button. So that's a
Yeah,
weird thing.
that's super weird.
So she's reached a level of maturity, and then when she gets traumatized, she goes in reverse and turns back into child mode
Yeah.
because Cry Me a
Yep.
River and all this made her out to be the cheater when it was the other way around. She said she had an experience with aliens slash God one night in the desert in Arizona. Did you catch that?
Yes.
This also
That
happened to
was
Elvis.
yeah, and it was just like, what's her name? Marjorie Cameron,
Hmm.
Jack Parsons, Scarlet Woman, she always would go out into the desert to, like, have mystical experiences and try to make moon children and do spells and stuff like that. But yeah,
Hmm.
she says, um, "It was almost like I went backward at the same time and became younger in my mind. Have you seen The Curious Case of Benjamin Button? That's how I felt. Somehow in that year becoming more vulnerable, I started to feel like a child again." And it's not the first time she says that. She says this like a few times in the book about feeling like a kid. And then, yeah, it's like, well, after this happened, I just decided to have a wild night with a friend out in the middle of the desert. And she said she felt, well, she says she believes in karma, right?
Hmm.
She says, as a child, I'd always had a guilty conscience, a lot of shame, and a sense that my family thought I was just plain bad.
You know, that comes from being abused. Essay,
Yeah,
feeling shame
yeah,
for no reason as a child.
yeah. Um, and this is the part where she mentions, having sex at 14, but she says when she's out in the desert with this friend, okay, I gotta read this part because it's weird. If you guys, this is how weird it is, how it's written. And this is where I don't know, like, is this really what she told the person and they really just included this verbatim in the book? I don't know. But she says, sometimes women's periods sync up. I feel like my emotions are always syncing up with those around me. I don't know what hippie word you want to use for it. Cosmic consciousness, intuition, psychic connection. All I know is that 100% I can feel the energy of other people and I can't help but take it in. At this point, you might be saying to yourself, oh my God, is she really going to talk about this new age stuff?
Hmm.
And she says, only for one more minute. But the point is, I was so sensitive. I was so young, but I was still reeling from the abortion and the breakup. I didn't handle things well. Justin framed our time together with me as the bad guy, and I believed it. So ever since then, I felt like I'm under a sort of curse.
Hmm.
So, I mean, she talks about being like literally cursed. There's like multiple references already to like seances and spells and magic. And it's only, 90 pages into this book that we're already seeing all this stuff. So, and it's a 275-page book. So it's just, yeah, as I was going through it, I was like, are they dropping these words on purpose or is this accidental?
Well, this is about the time where she's exposed to magic because during this lonely period with all of these crises that had just happened to her is when Madonna swooped in
Yeah.
and did the red string ceremony with Britney to initiate her into Kabbalah and gave
Hmm.
her a trunk full of Zohar books to pray with.
Yes. And just even her describing Madonna, like when she describes Madonna coming over and hanging out with her and talking to her, she says she felt, and we had said in our previous videos that we felt like Madonna was definitely like this ringleader, this grand master, high wizardess of whatever screwery is happening in this in this situation. And the book kind of describes her like that. It's like Madonna commanded power. She demanded to be in control and have power over everything. And you couldn't even, like, anywhere she went, she made sure that everything around her was totally under her control and that things went according to her schedule. And Brittany says during this time of hanging out with Madonna, we were doing things on her schedule. Like it was on Madonna time, it was Madonna's world.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of talks about her almost like she is this grand sorceress type of person. So I just thought that was interesting too. And
Yeah.
yeah, says
She
she gave me a little initiation.
yeah. So she's learning about power from Madonna and how
Mhm.
to wield these skills that they have um, to make people bow to you instead of trying to please everybody,
Yes,
right? That's what
that's
Madonna
right.
represents to Britney.
Yes, exactly. Which I could see that. That doesn't surprise me. I mean, that's kind of how Madonna's been from like the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a little interesting part that I want to know what you think, if this is actually Britney talking or if this is someone else's words, because she's talking about her experience in the desert where she says to her friend, "Do you believe in aliens?" I stayed quiet and sat there with a feeling for a long moment. Then I heard her voice over the wind. "Do you feel that?" she said. She looked at me. "What is that?" Whatever it was, she felt it too. I reached for her hand and held it tight. The poet Rumi,
Mm-hmm.
who's like a mystic, says that the wound is the place where the light enters you. I've always believed that. The thing we felt that night in Arizona, we felt at that moment because we needed it. We were so spiritually open. So I'm just like thinking, does Brittany really know about the poet Rumi? And she's like actually quoting the poet Rumi when she's thinking back on this, or did somebody else put this in here? Those
Well,
are the things I thought all the way through the book, though. What do
that's
you
so
think?
weird that you brought that up because Jay and I are working on a movie stream about weird kids movies, like creepy kids movies. So we're doing Secret of
Yeah.
Nim and Black Cauldron and um Wrinkle in
Did,
Time.
oh, yeah. You
And
guys already did Dark Crystal, so are you putting Dark
yeah, no,
Crystal
we're
in there?
not doing Dark Crystal. I can't remember the other ones, but Wrinkle in Time has that same exact line in it. There's a character called Mrs. What's It, or who there's Mrs. Who's It, What's It, and Witch or something like that. And one of them only speaks in quotes of great poets and thinkers like Shakespeare and lyrics and
Okay.
stuff like that. One of the things she says to the kids is that Rumi quote.
That's weird.
Yeah. So quote that again. It's very monarchy sounding if you know what MK Ultra is about. Like the
Yeah.
wound is the place where the light enters or something.
Yeah, the
What is
poet Rumi says, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." I
yeah.
have always believed that. It's like, really, Brittany? Have you? You've always believed what the poet Rumi said about the wound being the place the light enters you. It just, that struck me as odd and like not something I believe her actually saying. But
In a programming context, that sounds
yes,
perfectly normal,
yeah, it does.
right?
That's the thing. So it's like, if it's coming from her, I don't think it came from her brain. I think someone put it in her brain. And if it's
Mhm.
not coming from her, then I feel like the handlers who, you know, maybe had a hand in this book had something to do with it. I don't know. I don't know how that works, but
I just
she's
don't see Brittany reading Rumi and Gibran and,
in 2000
yeah.
when she's like 18 years old. Yeah.
Well, maybe it was
And
in the one of the books that Madonna gave her.
maybe that could be. Um, she says right after that, there have been so many times when I was scared to speak up because I was afraid somebody would think I was crazy.
Hmm.
That could be true. It probably is true. But I feel like whenever there's somebody in charge of the Britney narrative, they make sure to sneak in stuff like this all the time, because then any weird stuff that people notice where they're like, hold on a minute, can be explained away by, oh, but she's always been a little crazy, or she was always worried people would think she was crazy. Like they really want you to believe that she was always just a little off. And
Mhm.
I really do feel like that's part of the controlled narrative part of this, is to always try to portray her as crazy. But again, like, I was around when she was really young and she was doing tons of interviews and she was on MTV doing live stuff all the time. She did live awards. She was everywhere. Like in the late 90s, early 2000s, she was everywhere and she was on live TV all the time. She never seemed crazy. She never seemed, and there's lots of stars who do seem crazy even when they're live. Like Tom Cruise has always come off as a little
Yeah.
weird to me when he's live and stuff like that. She didn't seem crazy or unhinged or weird, but
No,
yeah,
she seemed
anyways.
composed. Well, this is when she gets the tattoo on the base of her neck.
Mhm.
the Hebrew word that means one of the 72 names of God. So she's got this Kabbalistic tattoo now. And this is about the time when her team, who included her father, forced her to like get back on the horse,
Yep.
do some interviews, and one was the famous one with Diane Sawyer, where she questions, she says we're 100% embarrassing.
Yes.
So she had taken time in this apartment in New York City to like get over her and Justin and the baby and everything. She was just being alone a lot. Um, and then Madonna comes in and preps her, and then her team comes back and is like, "You're gonna be back in the spotlight, but first you're gonna do this Diane Sawyer interview in your own house," where
Yes.
they come and ask you all these embarrassing questions. And that's the one where she starts crying, is like, "Ooh, be strong,
Yes.
Brittany." Remember that one?
Yes, if you guys, I have it like quadruple underlined and circled in here because if you guys remember when we did one of the episodes about this, and we spent a lot of time talking about this Diane Sawyer interview because remember we showed did we show it? The little clip of her in the interview where it's like she's a flip switch, and we kept saying
Mm-hmm.
the phrase, it's like a switch flipped. It's like a switch flipped. It's like she became someone else. And
Mm-hmm.
she says in here, that interview was a breaking point for me internally. A switch had been flipped. I felt something dark come over my body. I felt myself turning, almost like a werewolf, into a bad person. And bad person is capitalized,
Yes,
like it's a name.
exactly. I put that
I'm
too.
just like,
Bad
that
person in capitals. Yeah.
that's just one of those things where I was like, okay, this is a little bit much. This can't just be like super coincidental. It's very oddly specific.
So bad person sounds like an altar.
Yes. 100%. Yeah.
So this is about the time she's doing that Onyx Hotel tour. Do you remember when we
Mhm.
talked about that? Where it was like the MC was this creepy fat jester drag queen thing.
Yeah. And
Um,
yeah, we thought it was awful and horrible, and she thought it was awful and horrible. She said it was a total disaster. She wishes she never would have even done it.
it was nightmarish, she said, and I just watched a really good video on YouTube about how clowns are like come from demonic East Asian, Indonesian, and places like that. Like the clown look and makeup comes
Yeah,
from how they depict demons. I
I
might link
believe
that.
that.
Yeah. So this is what the Onyx Hotel was all about, like circus and clowns and bad person. This is when she meets Kevin too.
Yeah,
But
ugh.
poor Brittany, like I feel like she's never had a proper relationship.
No, absolutely not. She definitely hasn't. Like, reading about the Kevin Federline relationship was more depressing than I thought it would be. I remember that being
Me
everywhere at the
too.
time too, and like the whole world thought this guy was a douche. There was nobody who took that guy seriously or thought he was cool or thought that he was with her just because he loved her or any of that stuff. It was like the whole world saw the like slow motion car crash of the Kevin Federline debacle.
I know.
It's like, where were all the controlling parents? Because right before that, she had the accidental. By the way, did you notice they do not mention Jason Alexander's name in there in this book at all?
She just
They
called her
mentioned
high school
Jason,
friend.
yes, they
Yeah,
mentioned Jason Trowick because that guy is friends with the dad. So I
yeah,
think that's why they mentioned him. But they don't ever want to talk about Jason Alexander. They do not want to mention him.
right.
And she just portrays that as, oh, we were just being silly. I wasn't serious at all. He's never said that. He's always maintained that they were really close, that they had like this deep relationship. Again, we don't know, but I'm just saying his version of it is totally different than what's in the book. And everybody, I think you guys probably know what happened with Brittany and Sam's wedding and Jason showing up to that and going to jail. Do you
Oh
remember that?
yeah. Oh man.
So it's
It's like,
weird to me that he
oh
is like, his name is intentionally nowhere in the book.
yeah.
And he just says that all of this is lies, that this insistence of her family and the PR people saying they were never close, they didn't have a real relationship, they were just being silly and got married. Of course, the parents didn't want her getting married to him because they didn't want anybody who was not in their control to have any access to her money or anything like that. Like, to them, it's like, "Oh my gosh, they could take all her money."
Hmm.
But then they turn right around shortly after demanding she gets a divorce from him, and everybody's just cool with her marrying Kevin. Why?
Well,
That doesn't make any
who
sense.
who would have thought a man who would leave his pregnant girlfriend for another woman would turn out to be a bad partner?
Yeah, so I'm like, her parents were already in control because they forced her to divorce Jason Alexander after the Quickie Vegas wedding. So clearly that was something they were totally capable of doing.
Hmm.
And only a short time after that happens, they're just totally cool with this white trashy looking like backup dancer
I wasn't
guy
gonna
who
say it,
left.
but you said it. I was like, that's exactly what that guy is. Like,
He is, I'm sorry, but it was like, "Oh, you're fine with that. This guy can be totally trusted." And she got pregnant right away,
yeah.
and she got pregnant twice right away. I mean, she was putting me to shame just having
Mhm.
baby after baby, because she got pregnant 3 months after having the first baby.
I know.
So I'm thinking like, okay, her dad and her mom have all this control. Her handlers have all this control already at this point. They can force her, like, people can influence her to get the abortion with Justin. They can tell her she can't get married and force her to get a divorce. They can make her do tours she doesn't want to do, but she marries this sleazy backup dancer guy who's got a super sus past. Like you said, he had a pregnant girlfriend at the time
And
that
a baby.
apparently Brittany
No,
knew
not
nothing
just that.
about.
He had a full-on family, okay? He had a daughter with what's her name? Shar
Yeah,
Jackson.
yeah,
And Shar was pregnant with the
yeah,
second one when
yeah.
Kevin is going to Britney. So who would have thought that this guy would make a bad father? But
Right, but that's what I'm saying, like, this makes no sense why the parents were like, "No, you're not having a," like, "You're not having this wedding with your high school sweetheart friend, but
mhm.
it's fine for you to just marry this guy and get pregnant immediately when he's got a pregnant baby mama, he's a backup da he's got every reason in the world to be a bad actor." And everybody, she says too in the book, that at this time they knew everyone about everybody who was around her. She had so much security, and like people couldn't even be in the room unless like her security knew their whole background and everything else. So they clearly knew about this guy, and they didn't stop her from marrying him, and they didn't stop her from popping out two of his babies in the first 2 years they were together. And I wonder why.
Yeah,
Like, what was in it for these people? Like, why did they let this happen? And they almost facilitated it happening.
because
And
Kevin
then
was a piece of trash like them.
maybe, but I just wonder, like, because they kind of ganged up on her with him, right?
Yeah,
As soon as she had those babies, they used that to control her for the rest of her life.
yeah, that was the leverage they needed to rein her
And
in and
I think the only reason the conservatorship even was ended was because the boys grew up.
Mm-hmm.
The conservatorship lasted the whole time those boys were growing up, and by the time they were, like, of the age to say to the court, which parent they wanted to be with, and they're, like, almost grown adults now. Now, finally, that can't really be used against her, so that the thing ended, but I was just like, I feel like there was something else going on there. I don't know if, like, there was, a deal they all made with money. I don't know if it was a control thing, but it was just like, it's almost like, did they insert him into it, or did they just let it go on because there was something in it for them? But I just thought that was
Well,
insane,
yeah,
totally crazy to me.
he's definitely part of the pack of parasites because she supported him and his other children. So he let this 15 minutes of fame go to his head and he
Mhm.
started to treat her badly and refused to see her even while she was pregnant. So
Yeah.
he would be recording and she'd go try to see him, encouraging him to do his own thing, but he wouldn't even let her come in the studio. And she's like,
Yeah.
pregnant with his second baby.
Yeah, and people are just acting he's acting like she's the filth or something, like
Yeah,
she's beneath him, and I'm just like, again, everyone around her must have known this was going on because everybody around her knew everything that was going on with her, and they were all super involved. So, like, how is this okay? Like, if they were worried about Jason Alexander marrying her, I really honestly kind of feel like it's because he did want to get her away from them and he did
Mhm.
actually care about her and they didn't want that. And this guy was a douche and he was part of the control apparatus, so it was allowed. I don't know, but
So
she also says in this part that she hurt her knee on the tour and that they gave her Vicodin. Now, they also talk about her using Adderall. So they'll admit to silly things like, oh, she was drinking, she took some Vicodin, and she used a lot of Adderall or over-the-counter energy supplements. I feel like they snuck this crap in the book because, like, who are you fooling? I'm not fooled. It wasn't no dang Vicodin and it wasn't no dang Adderall. That might have been in the mix, but she was on much bigger stuff than that. Like when she came out on the VMAs and did that performance, the Gimme More performance that went so horribly wrong and was so embarrassing for her. The whole world knew that girl was on massive tranquilizers, and in the book, they try to explain it away by saying she was tired, that she didn't sleep the night before.
mhm.
And I feel like they say things like, "Oh, she took Vicodin and she was on Adderall," and I'm like, "Nah." And even lithium, Prozac, I'm like, Lord only knows what they had her on, but I think it was much bigger than Vicodin or Adderall.
Yeah,
That's just my suspicion.
even if it was just those are horrible to begin with. Even if it was
Yeah,
just like there is no just Prozac or Adderall.
that's true.
But I think you're right that there was like stronger cocktails being given because there was some weird scenes in one of her chaotic episodes, I think, where they came in, they're like, "Are you ready for your shot?" And they shoot her up every day with something and she's calls it B vitamins, but I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. And they probably told her it was B vitamins, but
Yeah.
this is again another thing. I mean, how many times have we seen this? Marilyn Monroe, they had on every freaking drug on planet Earth. They had multiple doctors prescribing it to her to get around the laws. Elvis was on such an amazing amount of drugs that it's kind of a miracle he didn't go before he did. Um, I mean, this is like something that every big, huge star will come out and tell you that they are put on drugs right away because that makes them easy to control.
Mhm.
Michael Jackson was on, they had Michael Jackson on such strong stuff that by the end, they were using euthanasia or not yeah, I think so, or anesthesia drugs, and he had to be on IV drugs daily. Same thing with Prince. That's how Prince ended up going. It was like fentanyl and anesthetics through an IV. So I just think that they admit to these smaller, like somewhat pettier substances to kind of give you a grain of truth that like, oh yes, there was substances involved, but I don't think we may never know like the real stuff she was on unless that gets leaked, but I have a feeling it's much bigger than that. So,
Mhm. So
but
now Kevin has spurned her. Uh, Kevin and Justin ruined her faith in people, she said, because she
yeah,
didn't
I
know
saw
how to
that.
play games for the public, and they did. And I think this is why people continue to love and like be curious and support Britney because you can just see that her core personality is very sweet, um, trusting person who would just like to have like a normal family, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've heard her say before even this book in the past that she really thought maybe she was going to have a chance at just being a normal mom.
Hmm.
Like there was this hope for her that she was going to just have a normal life and a normal family and be a mom, and that didn't happen. And then of course they take the kids away, which is
Yeah.
another thing that actually did really like make me sad for her in this, that they were able to just get away with taking her kids like that.
You can obviously tell there's not a lot of guile in Britney Spears. You know, she's just like a very straightforward kind of sweet soul. But I thought this was interesting. The person who was very kind to her during this time, who knew what she was kind of going through, was Paris Hilton.
Yeah.
And so Paris Hilton is coming out with her own stories now. Do you remember like last year or 2 years
Yes.
ago, she had that documentary?
Yep.
I want to play a clip from that because it talks about what happens to these girls like in these schools and rehabs and well, I'll just play it for you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hold up the phone.
Ago, I was in Europe and I met someone who was at one of those places with you, and I put you on the phone with them.
What did he say?
That you guys were at this place, and it was just like mental. It was like abuse.
There's Paris. Here we are, Paris' school. Here's Starry's room. Did you visit me there?
I don't remember, but then I saw a video. Wasn't I there?
You don't remember it?
No.
I feel like we both blocked it out. Mom and Dad always loved like hiding things from
Everything. They're the king and queen of sweeping everything under the rug.
Yeah.
My parents always hid everything from us, so I would listen on the phone. That's how I got all my intel. And I remember it was a school night. It was the middle of the night, and I just heard screaming, bloody murder. I knew there was a takedown in the works. I didn't know it was people coming in and capturing her.
I thought I was being kidnapped. Started screaming for Mom and Dad, like, help me. And then no one came. So they were taking me. Saw my parents standing by their door crying. And I was like, please help me, what's happening? And no one would tell me what was happening.
And then in the morning, it was breakfast, and Paris didn't come to the breakfast table. And my parents were like smiling, like everything's fine. And we didn't ask any questions. And then I think they said she like went to boarding school. So they were always trying to protect us and shield us.
Did you ever get like nervous that would happen to you? Because if they didn't really explain it to you on why she was going away, did you ever feel like
She was very naughty.
what?
She was.
Did you talk to her about things? Did you?
I told on her with everything.
Thanks,
I would
bitch.
listen on the phone. Have you ever said sorry to Mom and Dad?
No.
Like,
I
hell,
went through hell too.
I know.
The last school that I went to was Provo Canyon School. That was the worst of the worst. There's no getting out of there. You're sitting on a chair, staring at a wall all day long, getting yelled at or hit. I felt like a lot of the people who work there got off on torturing children and seeing them naked. They would prescribe everyone all these pills. I didn't know what they were giving me. I just feel so tired and numb. Some people in that place were just gone. Like the lights are on, no one's home. A lot of people were on suicide watch. And I was so scared that was going to happen to me. So eventually I found out a way to not take the pills that everyone would tell on everyone. And they found a Kleenex with all of the pills in it. I had so much trouble for that. Solitary confinement. Like something out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It made people take their clothes off and go in there like for 20 hours. Felt like I was going crazy. Someone was in the other room that was like in a straitjacket. I was just freezing. I was starving. It was alone. I was scared. My parents were in New York. They didn't know. But I was so angry and so upset that I hated them.
We're like
So
10 years ago.
that's what these places are like.
Yeah, and when Paris came out and started talking about this, do you guys remember the Cash Me Outside girl from Dr. Phil?
Yeah.
She goes by Bad Baby.
Yeah.
She says that the place that Dr. Phil sent her was just like that. I think it was also in Utah. It might have been the same place. And you guys might also remember that Dr. Phil was involved in getting Britney committed.
I remember
well.
that. We talked about that. Isn't that crazy?
Isn't it weird? A lot of coincidences. So many coincidences just stacking up in these situations. But what Paris talks about in that little clip you just played is not unlike what Shirley Temple talked about happening to her in like the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
That these Hollywood star kids would get sat in on an icebox in a dark room to make them behave a certain way, and like they low-key used like Gitmo torture methods
I was just gonna
to control
say
these kids.
Guantanamo Bay, crimes against humanity in Hollywood, just to get these child actors to do things.
Yeah.
And so this is a part where she says her family always treated her like she was a bad girl,
Mm-hmm.
even though all she wanted to do was entertain people and be a good girl.
Yeah.
So there's some dialectical programming going on, right?
For sure. Well, and this is the part where she says that she started taking Adderall because it gave her a few hours of feeling less depressed, which makes me think, I mean, we see this thing that all these girls say, which is that they're put on pills, right? Paris just said they're giving everybody the pills. It makes you really tired. It makes you really exhausted. It makes you very docile. Like the lights are on, but no one's home, which Prozac, they already had Britney on at least Prozac and Vicodin, if not other things. And probably the Adderall
Mm-hmm.
kind of counteracted some of this, that she might not have even known she was on this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about that when she's talking about the Adderall. And this is another thing that we find out in the conservatorship, that they very, very tightly controlled everything she ate or drank. And she seems to be under the impression that this was just because her dad got off on controlling her, which there might be some truth to that. But I think it was more about making sure that they were dosing her with certain things, that they were giving her certain things, and not letting her use anything that would counteract that, because they have an absolute meltdown over her using like pre-workout energy stuff,
Right.
like Chad mode from
Yeah.
Chalk type of stuff. Because like this guy she starts training with and is dating, like gives her just pre-workout, guys. It's basically just a little caffeine, maybe some creatine or something, nothing psychoactive, but it would counteract those types of things. It would perhaps screw it up. So if they had her on a regimen of medications, they wouldn't want her taking that. They wouldn't want her getting an espresso. They wouldn't want her doing anything that's going to like mess with that. And when they start her on the lithium, she's giving blood weekly, which is a thing because lithium can become very toxic very quickly. You do have to get regular blood draws all the time to monitor how your kidneys are functioning and stuff like that when you're on it. So I think she still seems to not understand why they were doing that. And it's because if you have somebody on those kind of drugs, you have to very carefully monitor kidney function and other things that can cause problems, and make sure that, they can keep their little cash cow going when she's doing the Vegas stuff. But so it still seemed to me from reading the book like she didn't totally understand really what had happened and what all was going on, because she just really seemed confused that they controlled her diet so tightly. And I know some of that was because they wanted her in shape and things, but I think a lot of it is because, like you said, we had a person with knowledge of the situation allegedly say that they were putting stuff in. So we don't know who, we don't know what. This is all just rumors that we've heard, but it would fit the long-standing pattern of what they do frequently with these mega stars. Like I just named a whole bunch of them, where they've got doctors putting them on IV drugs and stuff to keep them under control. So
Yeah. So she talks about the night of the episode, the infamous shaving the head. And this is after she had tried to go see her sons after weeks of Kevin keeping them from her. So that's probably why they allowed Kevin Federline, because he would play the, you know,
yeah.
he was on their side, not her side.
Yes,
Right.
totally. And
So,
he still seems to be
yeah.
to this day.
They were 5 and 17 months old. So imagine they're trying to keep your babies, your toddlers, your newborns
Yes.
from you. Like, that's cruel, right?
It's beyond cruel. She says in the book, she says, I imagined they're not knowing where their mother was, wondering why she didn't want to be with them. I
Yeah.
wanted to get a battering ram and go to them. I didn't know what to do because he wouldn't even let her in. Like Kevin wouldn't even let her in. Yeah, I would say I don't know how this happens, but I do kind of know how this happens and how it happened to her. But yeah, that's why I guess the head shaving thing.
So she
At
kind
least
of,
that's what she says.
yeah, skips over this whole thing. She did enter rehab at that time, but she didn't say anything about what it was like. But we just played that clip about Paris telling you exactly what it's like in there. She doesn't remember anything about it except her dad calling her a disgrace in the rehab.
Yeah.
And then she had to go to the 2007 VMAs where Sarah Silverman was out there roasting her on stage while she was crying in the backstage dressing room. So
Yeah.
how humiliating is that? You have to go perform even when you don't want to.
Pretty
And
terrible.
they're making fun of you at the same time. And then your ex-boyfriend comes out and is having a grand time winning awards. At the same time, Dr. Phil calls you a train wreck.
Yep.
He's in on it somehow.
Yep.
But in public, making fun of you. This is the time she says she was taking a lot of Adderall.
Yep.
And this is when Jamie Spears and Lou Taylor get into the cahoots for the implementation of her conservatorship.
Yep.
Right? 2007, 2008. So then her dad starts taking a bigger salary than he's paying her.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this. There's 2 separate forms of conservatorship, one of the person and one of the estate. And he got
Yes.
both of them.
Yes.
He got to do her business and her finances and her scheduling and her body like she is a baby, basically.
Yeah.
What you eat, what you drink, what time you get up, what do you watch, where you go. I mean, she has the privileges of what, like a 13-year-old maybe?
Yeah. Well, and this is one other thing in the book that I didn't know, where Britney says that right around the holidays, I found out about my 16-year-old sister's pregnancy from an exclusive in the tabloids. The family had kept it from me. This was around the time that Jamie Lynn almost filed for emancipation from our parents.
Mm-hmm.
Among the things she has accused them of was taking away her cell phone. She wound up having to talk to the outside world through burner phones that she kept secret, which this is something that Britney says happened to her as well, that they would not let her have a phone. And if she was allowed to have a phone, it had parental controls and they knew everything that was being said on it or done on it. And it would block her from being able to communicate with anyone but, the little handful of people that they said it was okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that Jamie Lynn had apparently almost also filed for emancipation. And the thing with her is like, it's very possible that she saw what was going on with Britney and was like, oh, I don't want that to happen to me. So I'm going to like walk the line very carefully. I know the Britney fans really tend to hate Jamie Lynn and think that she's evil. I don't know her. I couldn't tell you, but it's very possible that if you grow up seeing this happen to your older sister, who is like one of the most wealthy and famous people in the world, and she's powerless to do anything against it, that maybe you play the game, maybe you think to yourself, well, no sense in me going down with the ship too. I don't know.
Right. That makes sense. So her dad's got control of everything. He told her, quote, I'm Britney Spears now.
Yeah.
She says she has to live Groundhog Day now for 13 years. She says, I became a robot, but not just a robot, a sort of child robot.
Yeah.
Right?
And remember when you did the video breakdowns and all the robot stuff in her videos, all the different references to
Mhm.
that? So I thought of that when I read that.
So this conservatorship has stripped her of her womanhood and made her back into a child bot. This is when she starts dating Jason Treywick, who's 10 years older, and
Mhm.
he's kind of different. He's hyper vigilant. He taught her not to be clueless about her surroundings. And she says, now I'm basically a CIA agent.
Yeah. And
Right.
then she also says here, I might be I don't know if I'm slightly ahead or slightly behind you, but this is another reference where she says, um, she's talking about postpartum depression, abandonment from her husband, the torture of being separated from her two babies, and then her Aunt Sandra dying, which we had talked about in our videos before about how much that affected her. And she says, the constant drumbeat of pressure from paparazzi had begun to think in some ways like a child. So, like, just multiple times throughout the book, she makes this reference. So, sorry to divert a little bit, but I
Yeah.
just keep seeing that underlined in the book.
So this is when her parents moved back in with her, both of them now, because they had gotten divorced and now they're back together in 2010, 8 years later.
I
And she
know. So
says
weird.
they watched Criminal Minds on the couch every effing night. Who does that? Like, what?
Well, I know. It's weird. The whole thing with the two of them getting together and divorcing and getting back together and divorcing, like they're separated again now, right? They're divorced again,
Oh, okay.
I think.
I don't know.
But I just feel like the two of them probably have so much shady stuff that they've done together that probably a lot of the time they feel like they ought to just stick it out, but they
Right.
probably can't
They
stand
know
each
too much
other.
dirt on each other to like, yeah.
Yeah.
Watching Criminal Minds every night on at Britney's house while they're taking control of her life. She says, I feel like I age backwards when I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So,
Isn't that like a total Monarch programming clue?
yeah.
Yeah.
So then she breaks up with Jason. When he became a co-conservator, she said her feelings changed when he became part of the team holding her down,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and like I said, he was friends with the dad.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually friends with
Well,
Jamie Spears.
wasn't he paparazzi too, or what was his job?
No, that was a different guy. There was a different
Oh.
guy she dated that was paparazzi. Jason Trowick's from her hometown, and like his family knows her family, and he's like
Oh, okay.
he's in between Britney's age and Britney's dad's age, but he's friends with Britney's dad.
Okay.
So that's why I feel like they mentioned his name in the book and her kind of dating him for a while and all that, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't mention Jason Alexander at all. He's like their kryptonite, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, so then she says, in some ways, they turned me into a teenager again. In other ways, I was a girl, but sometimes I just felt like a trapped adult woman who was pissed off all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Are you to the part yet where she talks about Robin screening her dates?
I don't think so. I'm on page 195.
Oh, okay. You're a little bit ahead. So in in chapter 32, like in the 170 pages, she says, before a date, Robin, and this is one of the manager people, this lady, she would tell the man, like before she went on a date, Robin would tell the man my medical and sexual history. To be clear, this was before the first date. The whole thing was humiliating, and I know the insanity of the system kept me from finding basic companionship, having a fun night out, or making new friends, let alone falling in love. And then she says a couple pages later, under Robin's direction, security guards handed me pre-packaged envelopes of meds and watched me take them.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, you know, her whole day was controlled. She had to go to bed really early. She had to wake up at like 8 o'clock every day. She had to do performances, even if it was holidays or weekends. And she says that she did it all just because they would hold the kids over her head and she would get some visitation if she was being good.
Mm-hmm.
But if she did anything to deviate from the plan whatsoever, they would yank that. And she does say the circus tour grossed more than $130 million, and Lou Taylor's company TriStar got 5%. And she learned after the conservatorship that even when she was on hiatus in 2019 and money wasn't coming in, her dad paid them an extra minimum flat fee, so they were paid hundreds of $1,000s more. Talks about her dad getting a big percentage, so he got like $16,000 a month, more than he'd ever made from actually working ever in his life. But yeah, just I don't think they saw her as a person anymore at this point. They saw her as just money.
Yeah, or the robot that makes them money.
Yeah.
Because she says, this is what's hard to explain, how quickly I could vacillate between being a little girl and being a teenager and being a woman. Because of the way they had robbed me of my freedom, there was no way to behave like an adult since they wouldn't treat me like an adult. So I would regress and act like a little girl. But then my adult self would step back in, only my world didn't allow me to be an adult. The woman in me was pushed down for a long time. They wanted me to be wild on stage the way they told me to be and to be a robot the rest of the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I just saw the part where you said earlier where she said, I'm not clueless anymore. Now I'm basically a CIA agent. That's very bizarre. I don't know
That's
how
a
I
weird
missed
thing to
that.
say.
Very weird thing to say. She says she kind of lost any sort of passion for recording music or anything.
This is when she goes to make that song Work Bitch with will.i.am, which is,
Yeah.
we talked about that, how that's like what happens when you sign the, Faustian bargain is you're going to work for the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Have it easy. Then she went to Vegas hoping to win. So this is when she let them get her the residency there. Oh yeah, you talked about this. So that was her boyfriend in Vegas. So she meets Charlie Ebersole, and he tried to help her energy levels with vitamin supplements, but Brittany's dad told her she had to get off them and sent her to rehab again.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was just
Well,
giving her basic vitamin electrolytes and stuff like that. And
yeah.
You talked about all of that, how that would interfere with other pharmaceuticals they were giving her.
Yeah. So I think that's the reason. And so when she says going to rehab means she didn't get to see her kids for at least a whole month.
Mm-hmm.
The place he chose for her was in Malibu. If you go back to our old videos, we do figure out some of the facilities that she was in based on reporting at the time and stuff like that. And we do kind of a deep dive on who runs those facilities, what kind of therapies they use there, and the history behind that. So you can go watch that if you want to hear all that nonsense. Oh, and she says, this is the one, I think, is this the one where she's like strapped to the chair? So Paris said in the video you just played that they would sit kids down in the chair and face them to a wall and just make them sit there for like hours and hours and hours getting therapy.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same thing that Brittany says happens. I was forced to sit in a chair, which even me not being a dancer, and believe me, I'm not, you guys, I would go stir crazy. I'm not a person that can just sit for long periods. And if I had to sit in a chair for 8 hours a day, like she says she was made to, that would make me crazy too. That is like another form of torture, like forcing a person to just sit in a chair for hours and hours and hours, to the point that she said like her butt, she says her butt got fat. I don't know if that's what actually happened, but it probably fell asleep. It probably fell asleep, and she probably lost muscle and things like that. But yeah, that's like pretty awful to do.
Yeah. So they made her sit all day. Her ass got fat. Then her dad called her fat every day and made her eat the same thing for every meal: chicken and canned vegetables.
Ugh.
That
sounds pretty terrible.
No. For somebody who works like 24/7 and 365, and she can't even enjoy like anything about life.
Food. Yeah.
The basic food. So yeah, she makes a point about this. She says people have always treated her like her body was public property since she was young, something they could police, control, criticize, or weaponize, she says. So she never felt like her body was her own agency, right?
Which that might explain why she's constantly doing weird stuff on Instagram with the showing herself naked and those sort of things, which again, I do believe her brain is like scrambled. I think that she's not She's been like mentally shattered into pieces. So
Well, it's like the twirls alone. I mean,
yeah.
you could post one other thing. It's always twirling, except for
It's
the
twirling, and then it's always like the weird hand stuff where she's just like going
yeah.
like, and then she goes, "Ugh," and like there's this weird like face she always does. And then lots of naked posting, like me on the beach naked, me in the bed naked, me on the pole naked. Now she's got a pole. Oh, when I saw that she got a pole, I was like, oh,
Oh
Brittany,
no.
no.
So this is why we don't think she's free. This is not like
No.
her book of, you know, declaring some kind of autonomy from her handlers.
No.
She's deep in it. She's just Inception.
Yeah, it's just a new horrible nightmare, I think. And I don't know, of course, none of us know the extent to which she is still handled, but let's just say she wasn't handled anymore at all. Let's just say that the Free Britney people who want to believe that she's totally free, because there's accounts, by the way, you got to be careful because there's accounts that have been promoting the Free Britney stuff for the last few years and they make money off of it. And a lot of them are insidious, I think, and have bad, nefarious intentions. And some of them have been promoting that she's like totally free. She's completely unhandled. There's no more handlers. The parents are out of the picture. They act like she's just totally free. I don't know if I buy that. But even if she is, they've scrambled her so bad that she's in a prison in her mind anyway, is what it looks like to me. It doesn't seem like she can just like, because if she was just free and of her own sane mind, she'd probably like try to disappear to an island and like never be seen again just after the amount of crap that's
She
happened to
probably
her.
tried to prosecute all these people that did.
That too. That too.
Because she says, at one time I started to feel like I was in a cult and my father was the cult leader. They were treating me like I was beholden to him. And this is
Yep.
the same guy that she was scared as a child to ride in the same car with because he talked to himself and yell and get drunk and drive drunk and crazy. So this is the person that she's always trying to like grow up and get away from. And now he's controlling her life as an adult. Like that sounds like an ultimate nightmare.
Yeah, and if you guys go back and watch our old videos, we talk about some of his extremely shady business dealings that he's had going on for years. I mean, there's a lot. You could do like a whole, and maybe someday people will. I feel like there's like books that need to be written on him and some of these people that are involved because it goes beyond Britney even. I feel like she's a central part of this, but I feel like he's involved in bigger stuff because he had like huge companies that we kind of go over like multi-billionaire families who own like massive conglomerates. They own like entire parts of entire states. They have their little tentacles in all these like institutions of power. And he's making like business deals with them. He appears to be beholden to them. And I think it goes beyond him wanting to control her for just he wants part of her money, right? Or he's just a sadistic guy who likes to torture her.
Well,
Those things could be true, but he's, I mean, it's well known public knowledge that he's had massive gambling debts, that he's had massive business debts, and I think he got himself in trouble. And if he had to do this to her to get his ass out of trouble, it seems like he was prepared to do that. But again, I don't know anything. This is just my speculation.
well, speaking of his other partners, she says, I read after the conservatorship that my father and Robin at Lou Taylor's company TriStar had been involved with a security company they hired, Black Box, in monitoring and reviewing calls and texts coming out of and going to my cell phone, including private texts with my boyfriend, my lawyer at the time, and my own kids, and worse, that my father even had a bug put in my home. This was all part of their control. So how far do you have to take it? I mean, for one lady, you have to bug her home.
Right.
This is full on spycraft stuff. Black box, like
Yeah, this it's like deep state level spycraft.
yeah.
Which is why I think there was more going on than simply a sadistic guy who wanted to control his famous pop star daughter to get 16,000 a month from her. I feel like yeah, that part of the book right here is it's pretty indicative that there's something bigger going on than just that. Like she says, 4 o'clock in the morning when I had to go out in the living room as a little girl and say, "Shut up, mama," to her mom. Um, as my father lay passed out drunk in his chair, those times would come back to me at 4 in the morning when I woke up and stared at the ceiling, wondering how those people had come to be in charge of me again. And yeah, like that's all good questions, but it's like, is nobody else wondering like why they would have to go to these lengths?
Yeah.
That's really weird.
When her schedule, like, okay, by now she's had her Vegas residency. She's the queen of Vegas. She's got like every minute of her week is already planned out. And then she says, once I made it clear I wasn't going to keep doing Vegas, my family made me disappear. So she
Yeah.
said no to one dance move, and her team sent her to a facility and a flashy new TV doctor. They didn't say who.
Yeah.
They gave her a flashy new TV doctor to run psychological tests on her.
Yeah, this was the one where they did like a 4-hour evaluation and then sent her somewhere again. I think this was the longest rehab stint, maybe too, where they had her there for like a few months. It was
yeah, Beverly
pretty
Hills
bad.
one.
Yeah.
So yeah, so she failed the test, she said, and she had to go to a mental health facility, a small rehab in Beverly Hills that cost $60,000 a month.
Yeah.
They called it a luxury rehab where she wouldn't have to interact with other people, so she was forced into solitary confinement. She says they kept me locked up against my will for months. What else?
Well, this is the part where I wondered too, where she says a flashy doctor who I'd seen on TV and instinctively hated. They never mentioned that doctor. This is in all my notes. I have this huge notebook with all these notes on her, and I can't remember his name, but he was the African American gentleman who mysteriously died right before the conservatorship trial. You guys remember him? And he was like a psychiatrist to the stars. He's the guy that was connected to the MK Ultra hospitals. Um, they say this flashy TV doctor, and they say she sat me down, I believe. It's came to
Yeah,
my
it was a
house.
lady, I think.
Yeah, she said you failed. So I guess that wasn't the same one, but if you guys remember in her testimony to the court, Brittany said that when this gentleman doctor, the famous TV doctor, died, that she fell to her knees thanking God because he was so horrible to her. Like she said he was like the big architect of keeping her locked up for so long. Um, so I don't know if they used the pronoun she to kind of hide that doctor, if this is a different doctor, but I know that that guy still has a wife and children, and there might be legal ramifications for like naming any of these people in a book like this. So I wonder if that was him and they just used the pronoun she, or if it's a separate doctor. Could be either one, but that sounds like him to me because that was the one doctor that she has publicly said she just hated, and would ask God to like remove him from her life by any means necessary. So
Yeah. So here's what
she says, I honestly felt they were trying to kill me.
Yeah. So here's what she says that rehab was like, the $60,000 a month. She said the doctors took me away from my kids, my dogs, my house. I couldn't go outside. I couldn't drive a car. I had to give blood weekly. I couldn't take a bath in private. I couldn't shut the door to my room. I was watched even when I was changing. I had to go to sleep by 9 p.m. They supervised me watching TV from 8 to 9 o'clock in bed. I had to be up every morning at 8. For several hours a day, I sat in a chair receiving mandatory therapy. I spent time in between meetings staring out the window. She couldn't leave. The therapist questioned me for hours, like every day, 7 days a week. For years, I had been on Prozac. They put me on lithium. I felt my concept of time morph. I grew disoriented on lithium. I didn't know where I was or who I was. This is crazy. She's thinking about her grandmother, Jean, who unalived herself. Meanwhile, her security team acted like she was a criminal. When it was time for blood draws, the tech drawing the blood would be flanked by a nurse, a security guard, and assistant. She says, was I a cannibal, a bank robber, a wild animal? Why was I treated as though I was there to burn the place down and murder them all? I got my blood checked 3 times a day like an 80-year-old woman. She said, I began to feel like I was being ritually tortured.
Yep.
Quote, page 233, ritually tortured in therapy.
Yeah. And she says she felt anxious and could never burn off the energy. But yeah, that's why I wonder if it isn't more than just lithium. I'm sure lithium was part of it, but I think they mentioned that because they can relate it back to the grandmother, which, by the way, guys, the grandmother, even when the unaliving with the shotgun allegedly happened on the grave of her child who had died 8 years earlier, nobody in the town believed it. Everybody kind of suspected there was foul play going on, but Brittany's grandpa was old buddies with the Baton Rouge cops. He had mafia ties and all kinds of other stuff going on. So, like I said, I feel like I said this a year and a half ago when we did that first thing, but I feel like there was more than generational trauma and more than generational alcoholism. I feel like the grandpa was mixed up in some stuff because the hospital he sent 3 of his wives to, right? 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
It was an MK Ultra hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Robert Heath, one of the primary, like, there's a handful of MK Ultra doctors who were like the big guys. Robert Heath was one of them, and he was at that hospital in Mandeville at the same time that the grandmothers were all there. Like, I've gone back later to confirm this. I think I wrote a piece on my Substack where I detail this because I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe there was like a direct connection like that I was able to find, but it's there, and it would explain a lot about why this got so crazy out of hand, why the stakes are so high that they have to hire a company called Black Box to monitor everything. Just the amount of out of control that this got into. And then even in the book they're talking about the grandma, it
Yeah.
seems like a little much to me. And then why does she say, Jamie, why? Because you're the one who predicted that cannibalism is going to be the new thing, which I believe that you're right about that. Why
Yeah.
does she say, was I a cannibal?
Well,
What a weird.
they were treating her like Hannibal Lecter, she felt like.
Yeah.
She felt like she was just in a horror movie, and she was like, why are they treating me like I'm a serial unaliver when I'm just a pop star? I don't deserve all of this security and torture and blood drawing and psychological evaluations. Like, it just doesn't add up. Like you said, why 7 days a week for months, therapy questions for hours at a time? That would make anybody crazy.
Yeah. And it's not standard protocol at all. 2 of my closest family members have struggled with pretty severe mental illness, including schizophrenia, some of the most severe mentally ill that you can be, and have been committed. And I was there for all of that. And that's not like the standard procedure for how you handle that. Even a person who is a danger, like this, the person I know actually was a danger to themselves and other people, and they were not handled even this way.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not the standard. And she says, I did the program by myself for 2 months in Beverly Hills. It was hell, like being in my very own horror movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, now she says, I'm not scared of anything now. But she says, after 2 months in one building, I was moved to another run by the same people. And at this one, I wasn't alone. Even though I used to prefer being by myself after 2 months in what felt like solitary confinement on lithium, it was honestly so much better to be around other patients.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks a bit about the other patients, but that's a long time, 2 months, and then they finally move her to where other people are, but she's still not even out yet.
Yeah. She said that time in the hospital broke her spirit. So she's coming out a weaker person every time she goes into one of these places.
Yeah.
But this is when the Free Britney movement is kind of starting to get momentum. And
Yeah.
she does say that none of this would have happened if fans hadn't, interjected and started the ball rolling, asking questions and giving her more of a platform to speak for herself, because she said she probably would have still been under this conservative,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
She said it wasn't me, it was God, it was the fans. And then let's see.
The next page right there where chapter 43 starts, she says, the hardest part was that I believed that in front of the doctors or visitors, I had to pretend the whole time I was okay. If I became flustered, it was taken as evidence that I wasn't improving. If I got upset and asserted myself, I was out of control and crazy. It
Mhm.
reminded me of what I'd always heard about the way they'd test to see if someone was a witch in the olden days.
Yep.
They'd throw the woman into a pond, and if she floated, she was a witch and would be killed. If she sank, she was innocent, and oh well, she was dead either way. But I guess they figured it was still good to know what kind of woman she had been.
There's your witch talk again,
Yeah.
right? Framing
Yeah.
things in an occulting way.
Mm-hmm.
So now she's kind of out of the rehab. She feels like the Free Britney campaign was a catalyst to her beginning to win her life back. She went home and they had thrown her childhood writings and belongings away.
Yeah.
And she decided she never want to see them again. So it's kind of like you can't win with trashy people, which it seems like these people have proven themselves to be. She teams up with Elton John on a collab with Tiny Dancer.
Mm-hmm.
She marries Hassam in that fake ass wedding. Remember that thing?
Yeah. It's weird how they refer to him as Hassam instead of Sam,
Right.
but and I think that that's his real name, but it's just interesting that that's what they put. There is one part here at the last line of chapter 44 where she says, if I can manifest anything, I thought, let me manifest an end to this.
Mm-hmm.
So just another little bit of esoteric reference.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the manifesting, that's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And she does talk a little bit about how COVID kind of delayed things, as far as the trial to end the conservatorship.
Mm-hmm. Hassam calls her his lioness. That's kind of weird. That's
Yeah,
another.
we talked about that in our old videos too, because and you went over some like lion symbolism with the esotericism, I
Yeah,
think.
I found an article you're gonna love. I'm gonna do a rock fin on about it. Cults of the goddess and gender transgressions.
Ooh.
Yeah, you're gonna like it.
I know I'll like it. Her guys, you have to go subscribe to Jamie's Rockfin. That's where the good stuff is.
Yeah.
It's like, you know how the Instagram models will have their Instagram model page? They'll be like, go to the OnlyFans where my good stuff is. It's like the wholesome, good version of that, but
We
with
bear it
spooky
all on
stuff.
Rockfit. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like it's her really good research, and she's actually super funny too. Like I've texted you before because I'll be like listening to you while I'm doing chores or something, and you're so funny, and I'm always like cracking up. I'm like, Jamie's so funny. She doesn't get the credit for being hilarious that I think she deserves. Like when you were talking about the Mahatmas floating in the sky and all that, that just cracked me up.
The Secret Masters. Secret.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
You're
so
like,
goofy though.
you're like, they just sit up in the clouds over the mountains in Ohm, and that's how we got the UN or something like that.
Yeah, pretty much.
It is. It's pretty much how it works. Yeah. Well, after this, she talks a little bit about trying to talk to her lawyers, right?
Mhm.
And this is where I feel like they just kind of the end of the book feels kind of lazy, like they just kind of went, eh.
It's a very to be continued story, actually. I would
Yeah.
not say this book is a explosive tell-all memoir. It's just kind
No.
of like a middle halfway point. Maybe when Brittany's older and she's put all the puzzle pieces together, she can tell us more about what happened. But
Yeah, or maybe, I mean, that could have been part of the motivation for keeping the kids away too, so that the kids wouldn't know a lot of what was going on with her. Because I always hope that the kids will grow up and like tell us things that we didn't know, but there might be a lot they didn't know because Kevin's had them for most of their lives,
Right.
unfortunately.
And who knows what Kevin tells them about
Right.
her. I mean, they're two boys, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
She's kind of said on her Instagram that she feels like her kids have been told a lot of lies and that they don't know a lot of what's going on with her.
You remember when that thing went viral of her chastising them, telling them to put on lotion and they're being all disrespectful, and that like made a big hoopla in the media about her being mean or something. Like,
Yeah, there's nothing she can do. If she tries to like it doesn't matter what she tries to do at this point anymore, like a third of the internet will come out and say she's like horrible. And I know like I watch her Instagram too and I think to myself like, oh, like I almost wish that it was back in the days where she would take bigger breaks or something just
mhm.
because I feel like a lot of what she's doing is so embarrassing to her and I think that's why like even if she is still controlled they allow it because a lot of the stuff she does on the Instagram is very embarrassing to her.
Yeah,
And
it
I don't
doesn't
think
help
she
her
knows it.
case of sanity at all, does it?
No.
And then her sister wrote a book. I never heard about this, but apparently Britney's feelings were hurt about what was said in that book. Um, so yeah, the last couple pages are just like, I'm getting better now, but it's like, are you really? She's been getting
Yeah.
really bad migraine headaches, which she'd never had before. She's
Well,
had to sleep for days at a time. She loves playing dress up on Instagram, indeed.
yeah.
That's
Yeah, always with those white boots though. There's this one pair of white boots and then the pulling the bikini bottoms down super low thing.
well, listen to this. She says, I know that a lot of people don't understand why I love taking pictures of myself naked or in new dresses, but I think if they'd been photographed by other people thousands of times, prodded and posed for other people's approval, they'd understand that I get a lot of joy from posing the way I feel sexy and taking my own picture, doing whatever I want with it. I was born into this world naked, and I honestly feel like the weight of the world has been on my shoulders. I wanted to see myself lighter and freer as a baby. I had my whole life in front of me, and that's how I feel now, like a blank slate.
Oh boy.
That's some MK Ultra talk right there.
Sure is.
Doesn't Taylor Swift have a song called Blank Slate,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Uh
Did
second
we
to
already get to the point where she talks about having a miscarriage?
no, they just kind of glossed over that. That was Sam's baby,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um
I don't know I don't know what I think about that. I don't know what I think about that. It's one of those things where like my brain starts wildly speculating, but I don't want to say anything because I have nothing to base it on. It's just like after what happened with Justin, I'm just like, mm,
yeah. That's the thing, like you can your wildest speculation could be on point or it could be just wild. Like it could have been
yeah,
a regular miscarriage or dot dot dot. I don't know.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Of
exactly.
course you've got to have your Skittles page at the end,
Yep.
right? She's got that special relationship with that community going on,
Like mandatory these days, I suppose.
which Taylor Swift um did that homage in her concert, and so did Beyonce. So I went to the Beyonce concert in the movie theater,
Oh,
and I'm going to do a live stream on that probably maybe next week. But all of them always have to venerate the Skittles, right? And she does it in this book. Yeah, then she talks about the miscarriage. Then she talks about how the media continues to be cruel. And her idea of freedom on the last page says freedom means I don't have to perform for anyone on stage or off stage.
yeah.
So I don't think Free Britney has worked fully yet. I think there's still more bondage to be overcome. What do you think?
I do. Like I said, whether there's actual people controlling or not, who knows? We should also mention that her and Sam appear to now be getting a divorce. Who knows what the hell's going on with that? We've been speculating about him. He was doing all this weird Iran posting when they were trying to do the color revolution stuff in Iran. I have no idea, you guys. Like I don't know, and I still tell my husband all the time. I'm like, I have no idea. Like I really don't know what to think, except that if she's free, she's not really free. I feel like she's at least still trapped in her head because, yeah, like y'all have seen her Instagram, and I feel like it's sad and unfair because everybody wants to make fun of her. But when all of this started, she was a little kid. She was a little kid. She was not some girl who, and Taylor Swift, maybe I'm a little hard on Taylor Swift sometimes because she was also a little girl when when her career took off. And so when you start getting handled as like a 7-year-old, you're never going to be like normal. You're never going to have a normal point of view. You're never going to like, in other words, we can't hold them responsible and say, well, they shouldn't have acted this way or they shouldn't have done this thing, because it's like they've never had a normal life. They didn't get to be normal kids or normal adults. She never got to be a normal mom. Just her whole existence has been a weird fever dream. So it's like, what do you expect? So
Right.
even if you free her, even if there's no handlers, there's no conservatorship, she leaves the business, like what now? Like what is it that you would expect of her now for her to just suddenly start acting like a normal lady? I mean,
Right.
she's 40 years old now.
Just make some more
41?
records
Yeah.
or I don't know what they want out of her, but we'll continue to watch and pray and for all these girls really
Yeah.
that they find their freedom. But I think that is as much as we could squeeze out of this book.
Yeah, I think we squeezed quite a bit out of
Yeah, I
it.
think we did. We wheezed the juice out of it. What have you got coming up in the near future for us to watch?
Nothing too big until after Christmas. My family and I will be getting baptized in
Oh,
January.
congratulations, many years.
Yes.
We're happy.
I will actually be chrismated because I already had like a Trinitarian baptism, but I get to do that in the water with the family. And so it's going to be great. That's very exciting. So I'm kind of like between Christmas and that, I'm trying to chill a little bit. I am going to be doing a little bit of stuff with Diana Fadish, who is the lady who invited me to that academic conference at the theological seminary in Moscow, because they have like the church there is dealing with a lot of paganism and witchcraft stuff popping up all over the place, and the Russian church trying to like rehab and regain its identity after 100 years of oppression and craziness there. And so there's just a lot going on there that they're trying to figure out how to reach people. And I guess the feminism stuff and the witchcraft stuff is like one of the bigger deals. So my paper went over really well there. So I'm going to do like an Instagram live and then another piece for that journal. But that's it for me until the end of January. And then I do have some big shows I'm going to go on, but I can't really announce them yet. But stay tuned, end of January, bigger stuff.
Okay, very good. Probably next week I'm going to be doing a live about the Beyonce concert, and me and Isaac Weishaupt are going to be doing a show this Thursday. It'll be probably on Friday about Scarlet Woman. I've got that paper, the gender transgression and goddess worship. So it's all about cults of the ancient goddesses and cross-dressing.
Excellent.
And what else? Jay and I are going to be doing creepy kids movies soon, and also Lord of the Rings for Christmas. So I hope you guys all enjoy those gifts of entertainment, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming, Rachel.
Thank you for having me.